think I just wanted to address a couple of statements. I mean, I was watching your live from, when you had the background on probably like an hour ago. So I guess there was a couple of statements that I disagree with or maybe need more clarification on. So when you're saying that gender and sex are two different things and this is backed up medically, what do you mean by that? Or when you say scientifically / medically?
Well, the scientific and medical organizations, which are responsible for finding these things out, they all use years and years of research and data to conclude that your sex isn't your gender and that trans people are valid and that gender affirming care is good.
Okay, no, but I'm talking about the distinction. Like, what do you mean by scientists are making the distinction? If gender is a social construct, what does science have to do with the social construct?
What do you mean? Science is good at finding out categories, no?
No, but why is... That's really weird that... I'm sorry, what role did science play in distinguishing that this is a social category?
By looking at gender and looking at sex and how we relate the two and then figuring out that they're not the same?
Well, that's just begging the question. That's just like... So I'm asking
if you're asking me how they reached their conclusion, like they did peer-reviewed studies, they looked at the data, they looked at the evidence, they looked at...
The point is, right, so you have two main different sides in this conversation, right? You have those that hold some biological account and they say, when I'm talking about gender, I'm referring to some human notion of sex, right? So it's going to have something to do with the conjunction of age and, reproductive sex or something like that. And then you have the other side that's saying, when I'm talking about man and woman, it's best described through some set of social characteristics or some social archetype, something like that, right? The point is, number one, what's the truth maker of the situation? How do you know that you're right?
Well, you mean besides the fact that that's the general consensus amongst the medical and scientific community? Because I'm going to default to that every time.
Well, I reject that because, then I'm just going to go into philosophy of language, right? Which is just going to show that.
Babe. Whatever the language is doesn't change the concept of gender, does not rooted in my physical body, Like gender is just a social category.
Right, but words are just labels that we use to describe the semantic.
And if we change the words, the category is still going to be the same in a social category. If I called it a schmoobly-doo, it's still going to be a category of gender.
I'm just gonna repeat the sentence since I was cut off. Okay, so essentially what I was getting at was words are going to be, or language, right, is just essentially semantic intentions that we use to describe things or to best exemplify what we're talking about. And so the question, then I guess we can get into the medical thing if that's your answer, is when you're deciding the truth maker, because I hope you know that definitions aren't propositional. So when you're deciding the truth...
Are you trying to say they're not prescriptive?
Nope. They said they're not propositional.
Then go ahead and define that for me real quick.
Yeah, propositional is just something capable of being true or false. I don't know any.
That's not true. That's only true for descriptive definitions. For prescriptive definitions, it is about being true or false.
If you put in the word
definitions, literally prescribe what something is.
You actually would have had a better argument if you said descriptive definitions are propositional. They both aren't. Well, let me explain. Well, so you didn't know what propositional was, so I don't know why you have a strong opinion on if it's propositional or not.
But I just asked you to define it so I can understand better.
Right. But when someone's like, I don't know what this word means, and then 2 seconds later they're like, yeah, no, this doesn't sound right? You probably don't know what the word means.
You said something and I disagree. What's your point?
So I think that it needs better explaining then. I don't mind doing that. So what I'm trying to say is no philosopher holds the view that definitions are propositional. So if you do, you're one of the first people on earth to think that definitions are propositional. They're not capable of being true or false, since the whole purpose of language is just to describe semantic intention. The reason you would agree with this is because if they were propositional, right, that means there's some mind-independent reason for using this term over another term.
I'm listening.
Yeah, that at some point in history, one of us is right. I don't know what the truth maker of that is. So what's the argument for that?
The truth maker would be whatever evidence we have at the time, right? Like whatever we can be proven the most. And we can prove that gender is a social construct because the concept of gender and the things that make up gender constantly change. It's not something that is rooted in biology.
So when people thought that the earth was flat because that's all that we understood at the time, does that mean that the truth maker at the time was that the earth was flat, or were they wrong?
Well, that was the general consensus, but it was wrong. And we know that now because we're here in the present day where we have better evidence and information, just like how we know that gender and sex aren't the same because now we have more information.
Okay, so if the general consensus was that the earth was flat, but they were wrong, then it just shows that we shouldn't appeal to general consensus just to show that that's the truth maker of the situation.
Do you know what the difference is, though?
What's the difference between general consensus being the justification
No, you know what
for
the
belief?
difference between then and now is?
No, sorry.
No, do you know the difference between then and now?
Then and now between what?
Between when we thought the earth was flat and now when we know the earth is round. Do you know what the difference is?
I'm sure advancements, scientific
Not
and
just
technological
advancements, the scientific method. We got better ways of measuring things. Like
Correct,
people didn't have a consistent way of figuring things out. We didn't have peer-reviewed studies back then. And obviously we know it's wrong now because we have the evidence to back it up. And because we're here in the now and we have that evidence and we have those measuring data, we know.
Yeah, that's the point, right? So the point is that regardless if it's the general consensus, it doesn't mean that that doesn't mean that it's the truth maker of a situation. So,
but you would have to be able to disprove that it's not the truth.
okay,
right?
the reason why,
because you could definitely disprove that the earth was round. You would just have to know the right math, and we can disprove that sex and gender aren't the same things because we know what social categories are, and we have the research and the data.
This is all right. It's a bit, you're just rambling now because the whole point that I made, right, when I told you what was the distinction, right? How do you tell the truth maker of the biological account or the social account?
So
who's right,
basically, what you're saying.
Really
so I just want to try and understand what you're saying.
Oh, well,
so
I was literally in the middle of telling you what I was saying.
Oh no, I'm trying to understand.
Wait, if I walk up to someone on the street and ask them a question and they start to explain, I said, wait. Let me talk so I can actually know what you're trying to. Yes. Okay. I'm just saying that when you say that the truth maker of the biological versus the social account is going to be the general consensus of what the medical or scientific community is saying at the time, then it follows that the truth maker of, for example, the earth being flat was that the earth was flat because that was the general consensus at the time. But we know that that's not the truth maker, right? Although it's the general consensus.
Yeah, and from a philosophical standpoint, yeah.
So do you agree that just because something's a general consensus, it doesn't follow that it's a truth maker of a situation?
If there's not adequate evidence to back it up?
Okay.
Because
So
that's
that was
the
a conditional
difference.
statement.
Because that's
Yes
the
or no?
difference of what's the truth maker is evidence. Like, example, plenty of people may have believed that the earth was flat, but there was plenty of times in the world where people thought that the earth wasn't flat while the people thought the earth was flat. For example, back in ancient, I think it was, what was it? I think ancient Greece, people thought that, well, people started coming to the idea that the earth wasn't flat and that it was actually round, but you can actually prove that. You can't prove that the earth is flat, you know? And just like today, we have ways of measuring these things. We've studied, we know that gender is a social category.
Right. So I just want to be clear. That doesn't address anything that I said. The whole point is when I'm asking you what's the truth maker and you say it's a general consensus, then that applies to
I'm saying
anything.
it's evidence and data.
Evidence and data, right? But so if you want to revise it, we can get into what data means when it comes to language, because that's a category error.
Again, you're trying to I feel like you're trying to nitpick it to try and do some sort of rhetorical trick when that doesn't change that's still what the evidence and data suggests.
Do you think that, sorry, what is data, when you're saying data and language, that's a category error, correct?
I'm saying that the data and evidence shows that trans people are the genders that they say they are because gender and sex just aren't the same.
Yeah, but by you saying they aren't the same, do you understand that that's a verbal dispute?
Again, you're nitpicking the language instead of talking about the actual concept.
The reason why, what
I want to ask is, how are you going to disprove it? If what you're saying essentially is that the scientific consensus doesn't determine the truth, then what measure do we determine the truth by in this specific instance?
Language. It doesn't. So it doesn't determine the truth of language. That's just the most common sense take that everyone.
No. What is?
most
How
people
does? No. How does that? How is that relevant? How does that change that gender is a social construct?
So, how does what change a gender as a social construct? The fact that
How does your argument change the fact that gender is a social construct?
well, you're begging the question by saying that it's a fact. That's the dispute. So first of all, I don't know. You've done this
Dude,
3
okay,
times
so
already.
how do you disprove that as a fact? If you're
this-
saying that general
it's not-
scientific
it's not being
consensus,
disproved as a fact.
if you're
Do you think
saying
I'm-
that general scientific consensus does not make truth, then how are you going to prove that I'm wrong?
Do you think? Sorry, and there's just some confusion here. If you think I'm going to use the same argument you're using against you, I'm not. So I don't know why.
No,
you're not.
I'm like, where?
I'll explain. So I think that definitions, right? This whole conversation is obviously a prescriptive one, which you're familiar with, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, but the point so like I said, we may not have a ton of disagreement, but I had issues with things you said last live, right? When you're making it sound like definitions are propositional, that's false, right? And the reason I'm pointing that out is because this is a conversation surrounding philosophy of language.
No, this is a conversation about evidence, not philosophy. This is a conversation
this
on
is-
what you
no,
can
it's-
prove right now.
When you're saying trans women are women or trans women aren't women, right? That's set up as a proposition when definitions aren't propositional. Do you understand that?
I'm saying that prescriptively trans women are women.
Correct. So do you know that didn't respond to what I just asked, right?
No, I'm just saying that's my position. Prescriptively trans women are
When I
women.
asked you a question, if I ask you a question about definitions, you tell me the sky's blue. Do you think you answer my question?
But it's literally in relation to where your question is leading.
So the question was, when you put as a background, trans women are women and trans women aren't women as propositional, do you know, yes or no, that definitions are not propositional?
Dog, explain it to me like I'm 5.
Okay. The definitions aren't capable of being true or false, right? All you're saying when you're using them is either this is what I'm describing, this is what I mean, or this is the way that I think we should use words, right, for some utility purpose.
That's literally descriptive versus prescriptive definition.
Correct? Correct. And neither of those are propositional. So neither of those are capable of being true or false. Just so you know.
But that's literally isn't that the opposite? Like, I'm really saying this so I can understand your argument. Isn't that the opposite of a prescriptive definition? Because a prescriptive definition is literally telling you the requirements for something.
Right. So to be clear, yeah, even when you're describing something, like if I'm just describing, I don't know, you can think of any example, something in front of me, right? All I'm doing though, language isn't objective, right? So obviously all I'm doing is just giving some semantic, I hope you would agree, right? Giving some semantic intention towards what I'm trying to describe to you that's in front of me.
But I'm sorry, I am like genuine. I promise I'm genuinely trying to understand, but I don't see how this is relevant. Like, I really don't. Like, me saying that we have a way of defining a certain category, right? We know that certain categories have certain requirements, right?
We commonly understand them too. Yeah, but it's not that there's some fact of the matter there.
I mean, it feels like you're getting kind of like unnecessarily like philosophical about something that's pretty simple. It's like something is the category or it's not the category, correct?
I think that's the issue, is that this is a philosophical conversation and people just don't want to put in the time or the brain
That's not the conversation I'm having, though. The conversation I'm having is do trans women fall under this category? And from what we have about the category, trans women fall under that category. I'm not trying to get into the whole philosophical of, well, at this time in history, this thing means this thing. It's just a very simple, is it a part of that category or not?
No, I'm just saying, I'm just saying when anyone has backgrounds that have definitions, so trans women are women, trans women aren't women. I'm just saying that when you're telling someone else, that holds a biological account that they're wrong, right? I don't know if you've ever said this, but if you ever told them, no, you're wrong, there's a distinction. All you mean by wrong is that you use the words differently because there's no fact of the matter.
Okay, so you're just arguing. So again, you're doing an unnecessarily philosophical argument when we're talking about the general concept of these things. Like, of course, we're trying to come to an understanding of what we both mean, but under the category of gender, trans women fall under the woman category.
Okay, and I don't mind, I'll get into that conversation next, but do you just understand what I mean when I say they're not propositional?
I think so, but would you like to go ahead and go on to your next point?
Yeah, okay. I don't mind moving past that. It's just, no one holds a view that they're propositional. It's you don't even need to do that. But
I don't see how that's relevant to what, like, I get what you're saying, but I don't see how it's relevant, you know? Like, when somebody says, like, when I go up to a table at work and I'm like, hi, can I get you something? No one's gonna, like, nitpick the philosophical argument of, well, what is the definition? Most people just say she and address me as a woman because they understand me to be in the social category of woman.
I want to be clear that we're not at a restaurant. I joined your live because you had a background that was about.
I know, but I'm just saying, like, that's irrelevant to the conversation, you know? Because this isn't
very
about
relevant.
like personal definitions. It's about the general.
Right. No, it's just regardless, they're not propositional. So now that we got that out of the way. The second thing I disagreed with you is that it's inherently transphobic if you hold the view that trans women aren't women in any and every single context, which that's just trivially, like, that's obviously false. You understand that, like.
Well, if you feel that way, then we can just agree to disagree.
So you think that in every single context, like, not to be pedantic, but I mean seriously, you think that in every context that someone's being transphobic if they're saying that trans women aren't women?
Yeah, because that's literally a prejudiced view. Because that is literally a prejudiced view, and being transphobic means you have a prejudice against trans women.
Well, it depends.
That's so silly.
Depends how we're casting out phobia, but I mean, there's actually a lot of
babe. We're not breaking down the word phobia. We're talking about transphobia.
Correct. It would just be.
It's one word. We're not getting into the Latin root, because when you add other stuff to the word, it changes the definition.
Right. Well, we know the definitions are subjective, so whatever. I'll just grant your definition. Or do you disagree?
So if everything's subjective, then why are you bothering to try and debate me?
Do you think language is objective?
No. But
then I don't know what that point was
are
about.
Objective. For example, what? Hydrogen is the most abundant element in the universe. That's not going to change regardless of what
that's not a definite,
right?
Right. That had nothing to do with exactly, because that wasn't to do with the definition, which isn't propositional. That's why what you said was correct.
But that's what I'm saying. We know certain facts. We know that gender is a certain kind of thing.
That's not true. Wait. First of all, you're not understanding again. What do you think the purpose of language is for? To describe something that you're trying to express, correct? There's no fact of the matter.
Yeah.
This isn't objective, mind-independent thing, right? This is obviously just based on the human experience and language that we've created to describe things, which changes over time. Like, very, very simply, you agree. Mm-hmm. So you agree?
Sure. I would literally just like to move on from this point because it feels like we're talking in circles.
Okay. I think I'm checking off points on my list, but, okay. And then again, by it being inherently transphobic, like, I don't know, you can't think of a situation in which, for example, take it that there's some, like, I don't know, think of some medical case, at a doctor's office at some like ER, and they're referring to someone and they say, and, they don't check and this person's, in a coma or something. And they, they refer to them, they're referring to them as a woman. They don't, they have no evidence, right?
Well, that's not intentional.
Sorry?
I said that's not intentional. But when somebody's purposefully saying that trans women aren't women, they're purposefully saying that they aren't women, which is inherently transphobic.
Right, but it's not an entailment, right? So an entailment.
But you're changing the context. Somebody doing something unknowingly doesn't make it a prejudice.
Good. Thank you. So the whole point was just
but
holding
somebody doing it knowingly makes it a prejudice.
Great. So that's the point. Is when I asked, and this is why there's no need to make these like hard general statements. Earlier, if someone doesn't make say that this doctor I'm referring to does not make a gender sex distinction,
but that's not the argument I was making. The argument I was making is if you assert that trans women aren't women, then that's transphobic, not if you accidentally misgender somebody.
I'm not saying accidentally misgender. And also,
but
by
that is accidentally misgendering, is it not?
Mean verbally assert, or can they think it? Do they need to verbally assert it?
What?
So the point
was confused on the point.
Yeah. So the point The point is that you could think of a situation or a person, right? Like the ER example, you just take a doctor that doesn't make a gender sex distinction, you know, in her head, her whole life. She's known these two to be the same thing. She refers to her coma patient as a woman. Inherently, right? So this is the part where you probably should have said inherently. Inherently, nothing was wrong. Nothing wrong was done there because it's about intention, correct?
Well, yeah, but if you know that gender and sex aren't the same, and you know that referring to somebody who isn't trans, who isn't a cis person as that gender, then that would make it transphobic.
Right,
Like, even if it's just on accident, you can do prejudice things unconsciously. You can definitely do. Is that what you're asking? Because you can.
The point is, you said inherently. So you said inherently. So in the situation, in the hypothetical I just gave you, are you saying that the doctor was being prejudiced or being transphobic?
Let's see. So you're saying that in her head, she refers to this person as who is let's just say, for example, a male, right? Who is a trans woman, right?
No.
They say that in their mind, they say that they're actually a man. Is that what you're saying?
No. It's just a doctor that works at an ER sees a coma patient and keeps referring to this patient to her colleagues and other medical professionals as a woman. And you know, you could just say that. Are they
trans? Are they a trans man? What's the qualifier here?
She doesn't know, so she's obviously just going right because there's no gender sex distinction for this doctor.
But that falls under accidentally misgendering, right?
Wait. So the point is, great. So thank you.
I literally already addressed that.
Okay. So the point was that there's no need, and this is, again, maybe I'm being pedantic here, but there's no need to say that things are inherently transphobic. It obviously has a lot to do.
But what you're doing is you're removing the context. If you purposefully misgender somebody, that is transphobic.
Okay,
if you do it on accident,
disagree.
then obviously it's not.
I will look
because that's the prejudice.
I don't care to even look. I don't even care to disagree on that point. The point I'm disagreeing with is any time that someone doesn't make a gender sex distinction, right, regardless of intention or not,
that's not the point I was making.
Does not inherently follow that they're transphobic.
But that's not the point I was making. You're bringing up something that's a bit of a straw man, isn't it? That's something I didn't say.
So if they,
that's not even something I implied.
If someone doesn't, do you agree that an entailment of saying trans women aren't women, or thinking it, is also that they don't make a gender sex distinction?
It's inherently transphobic. It's like, that's just it.
Okay, so then the doctor.
That's why we're overcomplicating what is very simple. If you purposefully misgender somebody, that is prejudice. If you do it on accident, it's not.
What do you mean by inherent?
What?
You used the word inherent earlier, which is why I brought this up. What do you mean by inherent?
I don't know. That was a long time ago in my brain.
Okay, do you have any idea of what inherent could possibly mean to you? Oh, well, okay. So that just so you know, the whole reason I went on this rant was because you used the word inherent, and you don't know what it means.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. When I was talking to that lady.
No, you said it to me. But you also said it to the other lady when you're saying it's inherently transphobic.
Yeah, her saying purposefully that trans women aren't women is transphobic. Like, just because you don't accept...
I didn't say purposely.
I think I understand what you're saying now. Hold on. I think I understand what you're saying now. Just because... See, the difference is knowledge, right? The difference is the context. Not only had she been explained to it that gender and sex are different scientifically, but she also admitted that she couldn't get over the social category that I threw out.
Right. So the point is, I don't mind if you need to switch me out soon or anything, but I just want you to know the point. When you say it depends on the context, that's contradictory to saying that it's inherent. Do you agree?
No, in that situation, it is inherent.
Okay, but that wasn't the claim.
It's specific. That was a specific context. Like, if we're talking broadly, everything isn't going to apply for every situation. But I'm talking about a very specific context.
No, that's not what you said to the prior guest. So what you said to the prior guest was that
because her specific statement was that she doesn't believe that trans women are women, which is a inherently transphobic position if you're aware of trans people and how they work. That's what I explained.
Okay, the statement that was made, again, was that if you hold this belief and you don't make the distinction, that it's inherently transphobic. And the point is, then when you follow it by, it depends on the context, that's contradictory
But I
to
was
saying,
talking about a very specific situation. I wasn't talking in every single context. I was talking to that specific woman about that specific situation. Like, obviously, things change depending on the context, but I was talking about a very specific person and situation.
yeah, I just want to be clear that that's probably what you meant, right? But that's not what you said. So, I mean,
That the statement trans women aren't women is inherently transphobic.
yeah. And then when you follow that by it depends on the context, means that it's not inherent. Unless you want to
Okay.
give a definition for inherent that's different than mine.
Okay.
Right? Because inherent is implying universal. It's not implying
Okay,
particular.
well, obviously, okay, how about this? I misspoke. In that specific context, that is transphobic. Obviously, if someone is not aware of what trans is or what trans people are, it wouldn't be inherently transphobic. But that's not the situation we were talking about. I was talking to a person who is aware of trans people and aware of how they work.
Right. Okay. No, that's fine. If you're saying that you misspoke, I don't agree. If you're saying, or sorry, I don't disagree. If you're saying, someone walking up to you on the street, they call, this person a woman and they're like, wait, no, I'm actually not a woman. I'm a man. I prefer you call me that. And they're like, no, you're still a woman. It's like, of course. Yeah. There's not disagreement there. I was just, when you say inherent, that's a very,
I feel like that's implied though. But I feel like
no, I'm just saying, no, that's what I'm saying is that the point that you're making, there's not disagreement. There was only disagreement when you used the word inherent, because obviously I disagree that in every context.
Okay. I'm confused on how this is relevant to the broader point. Like, that's my thing. Like, I'm like confused on how any of this is relevant to the broader point.
It's that you had a debate, and I noticed probably 3 things that you said that were just obviously false, and so I'm just addressing them.
Oh, I didn't specifically clarify I meant in that specific context. But a lot of people got that I meant in that context.
Right. No, first of all, that's a huge dispute. I don't know if you watch any of these panels where they debate this stuff, but they debate if this is inherently transphobic all of the time. There's a lot of dispute over this. So
do you agree that, but we literally agree on the same thing. We just reached an understanding. I still don't get how this is relevant to the broader conversation I'm trying to have here.
Yeah, we can. So it was just, it's just a point. So, debates move in certain ways, and this was just a point that was made in your previous debate. So obviously, if you want to wrap it up and talk about the broader conversation or switch me out for another guest, that's fine. It's just, obviously debates move in little conversations, and that was one of them that your last one did. So.
Okay. I appreciate the knowledge.
Yeah, of course. I don't mind if you want to switch me out, but I just wanted to thanks for letting me up here, and hopefully I didn't take too much of your time.
Oh no, you're good. It's all good. I was just confused on, because to me, like, I get what you're saying. It just doesn't feel relevant. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, I get it. But most people, when I say that, they know that I mean in a specific context. And so and I understand what you mean from a technical aspect, but it just doesn't mean anything to this conversation,
No, yeah, sure. We could say I was being pedantic. That's fine.
Yeah, it's a bit of a nitpick.
Yeah, the main issue that I have that I don't think is kind of being like a little nitpick is that I don't think that medical professionals are making. So I think that there's a very big difference between our scientific community and the philosophical community and people that study language and how we use that.
That's fair. Philosophy, and science are two different two different disciplines.
Right. Like, for example, this is the best way that I can describe it, and I really hate when pro-lifers do this, but I don't know if you've watched any abortion conversations, but when pro-lifers say life begins at conception, therefore all of these things, like, for example,
when we're talking about personhood instead of life,
moral value. Yeah, like all this stuff. Well, scientists don't make moral claims, right? So they can determine that. They can give you some set of characteristics for biological life, but they're not saying that we need to value this. They're making no prescriptions out of it. You know what I mean? So I just want to be clear that, so then that was just the main issue I had when you were saying things like you're talking about data and language just sounds like a category error. Like, they're two separate things. You could say that the data gives you reason to want to use language this way, I guess.
I mean, don't get me wrong, right? I absolutely understand where you're coming from a intellectual standpoint, right? I understand what you're going from a very technical aspect, right? But when we're having these broader conversations, that kind of thing isn't really, I feel like that's not really necessary to get super pedantic about. And I totally understand what you mean. Like, I get it. And that is a good point. But it's not relevant. Like, most people aren't nitpicking apart what I'm saying. They're just understanding what I'm saying because of the context, you know?
I agree, but I think that people should, right? Like, if I say something and you're just like,
I don't know. I feel like it's better to have I feel like nitpicking in conversations would just stall the conversation, right? Like, cause like right now instead of having the conversation I wanted to have, we're doing an unnecessary amount of like nitpicking when people understood what I meant, you know?
I mean, I disagree. I think the whole chat was, I mean, I don't think they definitely understood what you meant, but you know, I know you're like,
plenty of people
fast.
in my chat said that they understood what I meant. Like, I literally saw somebody say that they understood. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong. I get what you're saying. And I'm not saying you're necessarily wrong. I just don't feel like it's relevant to the conversation. Like, in this context, you know?
Right. So if
like, it's not necessary to police the language to such a degree where it becomes hard for most general people to understand, right? When one of the best ways, what was it? It was a smart person can explain something in a way a child can understand. Like, you don't have to get super technical and nitpicky when having a broader discussion most times, you know? Like, that a lot of people get lost in that, you know?
to a degree, like my main thing is abortion debate. So I would usually grant people, like, I'm not crazy about definitions other than debates that are literally about the way we use words. Like, of course we're going to get semantic with it because it's literally a verbal dispute.
Yeah, but I'm more so talking about the concepts than the words themselves. That's what I appreciate your time. I do. I just feel like we're just kind of going in circles, you know?
Sure. Yeah, I don't mind. You can kick me. That's fine.
Well, I appreciate you coming on. And yeah, I will try and keep in mind what you said. I'll try and do it in a way that doesn't muddy the waters. I think that's what I was trying to get across, right? Like, I'll try and get it away in a way that's not super, you know?
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. I hope you have a good night.
You too. All right, I guess. Oh my God, it's so late. All right, I guess we're on to the next one. She had a beautiful voice. She had a very beautiful voice. I meant to say that. She has a very beautiful voice. All right. And we're on to the next one. Hello?
Hey, how you doing?
Hi, how's it going?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. And for the chat, I understood what she meant. It just didn't feel relevant. Like, you know, like some people are saying she was just kind of talking, and I get where she was coming from. And while I disagree on the relevance, I'm not going to say that she was just yapping. Cause like, I understood where she was trying to go. I just don't feel like it was relevant.
No, I feel you too on that. I feel like it was just, like you said, a lot of around the world and, you know, so I mean, I completely understand too, but like, you know, my point of view of it, like me, I'm part of the LGBTQ community myself. And like, I'm very big on, I don't judge anybody. I let everybody live their life how they want to. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, it's like, I understand both sides of the argument, if that makes sense, you know? Mm-hmm. You know, in my opinion, like, you know,